So if you watch my portfolio project video, you should know that what hiring managers are actually looking for in portfolio projects are real insights that would actually have an impact on a stakeholder. It's not just SQL skills, it's not pivot tables, and it's not just dashboards. It's how you actually tie all these skills together as a system to deliver insights that have real business value. And a lot of aspiring analysts ask, well, how do I actually do that? So today's video is a deep dive into the Lunch and Learn workshop I did, in which I'm talking through concrete examples of how to bring business metrics to the surface in every area of your job hunt and your projects to really stand out. At the end, I'm answering popular questions about how to be creative in finding real data sets for your projects, how to use more data on your day-to-day job so that you can transition into analytics, A/B testing, and also how to actually impress hiring managers if you're just starting out. We had about 120 people from all over the world join us in this workshop, so I'm really excited to share our discussion with you, and let's dive in.
Oh, whoops, sorry, Christina, I accidentally muted you.
I'm no longer allowed to speak. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, hi everyone. Thank you guys for joining us on a Saturday. If we haven't met yet before, I'll just do a really quick intro. So I'm Christine. I've worked in analytics since 2015, was a data analyst, was a data scientist at some point, then eventually became a data director. And last year I started a mentorship program to help people make this transition in the most effective way. And my YouTube is pretty much just a way to give back to the community of aspiring analysts all over the world and just help you guys understand what are the strategies, the tips, and the insights that are actually helping people make this transition. And so in today's session, I wanted to just talk about business metrics because I think it's a concept that there's not a lot of resources out there about how this is actually used in the day-to-day job. So what I figured we'd do is we'll watch the most recent video together, just like 8 minutes of it, just so we're all starting on the same page. And then we'll pop over to some examples of how this actually looks in the job hunt. So I want to give you some like concrete examples of what it means to include this in your resume, in your projects, and also in your interviews. And then I know a lot of you guys have also been curious about how the mentorship program works. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then at the end, we will open it up to Q&A. I'm going to try to have people unmute and actually have like a discussion, but we'll see how it goes with a group this big. So hi, everyone. If you're just joining, join us at slido.com. We're going to use that for our Q&A. And that is last time I will say that. Okay. We're going to play this YouTube video. Can you guys see my YouTube? Just give me a thumbs up. If so, okay, cool. And then if you can't hear it for some reason, Vix, just let me know, but we should be okay. So we'll watch this and then we'll pop over to a presentation. Students. So we all know that a data analyst turns data to insights and recommendations. And if we look one level deeper, we'll see that insights are really just about understanding metrics and their root causes. And effective recommendations is built on top of effective communication. In this case, metrics are pretty much the what of what we're trying to understand on the day-to-day, and the root causes explain the why behind their movements and their fluctuations. If we think about the day-to-day questions that we're going to be getting from stakeholders, those are questions like from a marketing manager: why did the conversion rate on the US free trial page go down? Or maybe you're working with an FP&A analyst and they're asking, what were the main drivers behind the revenue spike last month? Or maybe you're working with a product manager who's asking, what is the adoption rate of the new webinar tool and how does that compare against the old webinar tool? At first, all of these questions can look pretty overwhelming, but if you take a step back, you'll see that they're pretty much all asking about a metric and that metric's movement. And at the end of the day, sorry, really quick. As we're going through the video, if you guys have questions, just pop them into the Slido in the Q&A and then vote on each other's questions as well, because we probably won't get through all of the questions. So I just want to make sure we get to the most popular ones. And then if you want, also put down your name when you ask that question so that you can come off mute and then we can actually have a discussion towards the end. The big question is always, what should we actually do about it? Impactful data analysts help people understand the so what behind why a metric is moving up or down. And so the more you can actually show this ability in your projects and in your interview responses, the more immediate value they'll see that you can bring to the team and the more you'll stand out. So I want you to actually start familiarizing yourself with the most popular metrics that data analysts work with. And I'll just start you off by sharing some of the metrics that I've worked with throughout my own career. When I was working at JustWorks as a data analyst, I partnered with the marketing team, and they cared about metrics like traffic, impressions, click-through rate, and customer acquisition cost. Then I worked at Oscar Health, which is a healthcare and tech company, and they cared about metrics like revenue per member, claim amounts, claim counts, and medical loss ratio. When I was working at Vimeo, I worked with the finance team where they cared about metrics like recurring revenue, subscribers, and bookings, and a product team which cares about numbers like active users or net promoter score and customer satisfaction score. Now, a lot of aspiring analysts ask me, well, what if I don't want to pigeonhole myself into one specific industry, or what if I'm not really sure what industry I actually want to work in? How do I gear my projects towards something that will resonate with a hiring manager? In that case, if you look back at the stakeholder question that I showed you earlier, you can see that it pretty much revolves around what drives a metric up or down across various dimensions and what should we do about it, which means that if you can understand the analytical techniques to actually translate metrics to insights, you can pretty much abstract away what that specific metric or that dimension is. Yes, domain knowledge is super important and it can really make you stand out, but for early career data analysts, it's most important to learn to apply the frameworks that turn these metrics into insights, because then you can use that to stand out across a variety of different industries. So I'm going to show you a really simple 4-pillar framework that I use to understanding metrics. And first, we want to think about what are the questions that we're actually trying to answer. In this case, it's what metrics do we care about? What are their values and their trends? What drives their movement? And what should we do about it? And each of these questions can be broken down into smaller and smaller steps. The next level down are doing things like defining the North Star metrics and dimensions. And if you don't know what I mean by North Star metrics, make sure to watch my data lingo video. Then the next step is to report, visualize, and slice, and really start to explore and understand what some of those trends are so that you can start to uncover the drivers and relationships that actually impact that metric moving up or down. Lastly, that's when you start to formulate your recommendations based on what you saw and communicate that to stakeholders in an understandable way. We can also break this down more into smaller steps, where the first step is pretty much defining and calculating each key metric. Now, I say define because you'd actually be surprised the number of times where at work, we think we're talking about the same metric, but it's actually calculated differently across different teams. So it's really important to document what those metrics are and how they're calculated. Then identifying the associated key dimensions. So finding the qualitative segments that you have available in your data set that you can slice that metric by just to understand how that metric looks across the entire population. Then in reporting, visualizing, and slicing, we can almost always slice by a universal dimension called time. And that's just the start of doing something like seasonality analysis. Then when we slice by those other dimensions and the other qualitative values, that's where we start to get into segmentation. And through this process, once we're looking at those values and what we've built, we can start to actually translate those trends to observations and actually report those values and findings. Normally, as a data analyst, we'd be working on a team where there's a larger context about how these findings fit into the bigger picture, where you would work together to start to craft a digestible narrative with other people who have context about how this fits into the other parts of the business. So let's take a quick look at all this in action. Let's say I'm working as a data analyst at a healthcare company and a marketing manager asks me, what are the best performing campaign types based on signups and what should we actually do about this? In this case, my data set looks something like this, where the table green is the campaign ID. Then I have campaign category, campaign type, which is just a subset of the category, the cost, the platform, the impressions, clicks, days run, and the number of signups that trickle down from that campaign. Because the stakeholder has defined best based on signup metrics, I'm going to identify my North Star metrics as signup rate, cost per signup, and signup count. In terms of the dimensions, I have campaign category, campaign type, platform, and in this case, time got cut off, but we also have a time variable. So one of the first things I would do is actually quite simple. I would just calculate those metrics and slice it by one of the first key dimensions, which is the campaign category. And in this case, if I were to sort everything by signup count, I can see that healthy living actually has the most number of signup counts, but health for all, which comes in second place in terms of the absolute value, has a much higher signup rate and therefore a much lower cost per signup. Interestingly, the worst performing campaigns, they're not only the worst in terms of the signup count, but across the board with the other signup metrics as well. So that would definitely be something to look more into. The next thing I would do is actually visualize this over time. And so if I build a line graph and I can look at what these different campaign categories look like over time, with a legend, of course, I would be able to see a little bit more, but I can definitely see that there's a huge spike in the beginning of 2020, probably coinciding with COVID because this is a healthcare company. And then at the end of 2021 and 2022, when every other campaign is performing worse, the campaign that's in orange is actually still on the rise until it goes way down at the end of 2022. So definitely something to look into there as well. Right now, when I'm just getting started, I'm just prioritizing clarity over complexity. I'm not necessarily doing something really fancy at this point because I'm really just trying to understand what those overall trends are in the life of this metric. And even with just this simple table and this graph, I can already start to surface some insights like this one. The hashtag healthy living social media campaigns had the highest number of signups, but health for all campaigns have significantly higher signup rate with half the cost of acquisition. And if I were to bring this to a stakeholder, we probably have a discussion about what this means in terms of the budget. I could start with something like consider reallocating the budget from the 3 worst performing campaign types, which perform much worse across all 3 North Star metrics, to increase the budget for health for all campaigns which have the highest ROI. Early on in your career as a data analyst, you probably won't be responsible for giving the end-all be-all recommendation to another team. Instead, you'll be working on a team to bring together the context of what's actually feasible and marry that with what you're observing in the numbers to figure out what the next steps are. So if we look at what this actually looks like in a project, in GitHub, you could put this in an insight summary, where in this case, this student identified his North Star metrics as sign-up rate, cost per sign-up, and click-through rate. And then he also went through each of those metrics and started observing what are the top line insights that someone would want to know about. So in this case, he talked a little bit more about the sign-up rate, and then later on in this project went way more into detail about the visualizations, the recommendations, and the technical process. So just to give you a little bit of motivation for how this can help seal the deal in an interview process, this is a note that one of my students got after he did an amazing job at an interview. And they said, "You did such an amazing job preparing for the day and organizing your thoughts and examples in an easy to follow structure. Thanks for sharing links to your project work. These are wonderful examples of distilling data into meaningful, actionable insights." Okay. I'm just going to pop over to the Q&A and make sure our questions are coming through. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to pop over to this presentation really quick, and I want to just give you more concrete examples of like, what do metrics look like when you are actually working on projects in your resume and the job hunt. One thing to take away is like, think of metrics as a theme. It's a thread that should be carried through every single thing that you're doing on your resume and when you're analyzing data in your projects, and also your interview responses. So in your resume, I think you guys know this by now, it is really important to be able to show business impact where you can. I know this is not always the case, especially if you don't have lots of experience. For those of you guys who do have some work experience, it is okay to estimate. You basically need to come up with an estimate of what that impact was and be able to logically explain your rationale. It's fair that like not everyone is going to be able to say, I have it documented that I increased this metric by this X percent. So as long as you can explain the rationale, like that is a number that you should be putting on your resume. Otherwise, you can always show values about things like the number of people you were working with, the number of presentations you built, the number of records you were working with, or the percent of change in any kind of metric. Like any job has values in it. It's just up to us to figure out, okay, what are the quantifiable kind of things here that I can bring to the surface? With projects, I recommend starting with 3 North Star metrics, and watch the data lingo video if you need a refresh on what North Star metrics are. But it's pretty much like, what are the most important metrics to a company or to an industry? So that's one way to focus your projects in one direction rather than getting lost in all the technical stuff. And you want to orient all your insights, your recommendations, and your visuals towards those metrics. Because like I said in the video, those metrics are the backbone of what we're doing at work, right? So the more you can actually show that in your projects, the more it translates directly to what we're doing on the job. And then for interviews, flex your knowledge of metrics. And by this, I mean, like, if you should be studying some metrics. You should be understanding what are the metrics in the business models of companies that I'm interested in working in. And so when you get to the interview, if you can talk about your understanding of those metrics or even kind of show it in the questions that you ask, that will be really good bonus points. And then also understand that company's North Star metrics. So anytime you step into an interview with a new company, research, like if I was a data analyst working at Spotify or Uber or any kind of company where you do a little bit of research on like in this industry, what are the top 5 metrics that a data analyst would be working on here? That will orient you for when you get business case questions, like how would we understand if this metric went up or down? So I'll show you a few concrete examples. These are all examples from students who have successfully gotten jobs in the last 10 weeks. Okay, so just so you know that, these are all the tidbits of what is really working. So this is a student who was working as a marketing analyst before. She utilized data analysis and reporting to enhance efficiency and decision-making within a secondary group, supporting 300 plus loan officers, increased operational efficiency by reducing processing time by 67%, from 24 hours to same-day resolution by resolving help desk tickets and analyzing data for rate price questions, extensions, product changes, and other production requests. If you think about this bullet, the before version of this bullet looks something like, did data analysis for loan officers and increase strategic decision-making, like something very generic. But you need to go one level deeper to actually surface the value so that I can just get or hiring managers can get an anchor point of what is it that you are actually doing? Like, what is the magnitude of what you were doing? And I'll just note that like, it's not really the size of the metric that matters. Like you don't need to have like a crazy metric, like $5 million or like reduce processing time by 70%. It's more so, it's kind of like a meta thing. Like we are working with numbers all the time. So show that you can work with numbers by actually having them on your resume. So the metrics that are already in there, 300 plus loan officers, processing time by 67%, 24 hours to 1 day. Let's say she didn't have these metrics. Then there are also other ideas for what else she could bring to the surface. Those are things like the number of help desk tickets, right? So like, just help me understand what's the number of help desk tickets that you're working with on a weekly or a monthly basis, the number of records in the data set that she's working with, and even the name of the price metric. So in this bullet, she said rate price questions. Someone might not understand that. Like if you ask yourself, would someone who's in data and not in this domain understand what this phrase means? And this answer is no. Go one level deeper and explain it a little bit by including phrases of those metrics. So that could be elaborated on a little bit more. If you don't have work experience like that, like obviously a marketing analyst experience is pretty translatable to data. If you don't have that kind of work experience, you'll definitely need at least projects. And it's not only important to do projects that have company relevance, but it's important how you talk about those projects on your resume, right? So like that's the last step of making it really clear that even in those projects, you're demonstrating the real data analyst skills. And here's an example of how you can talk about your project. So e-commerce sales analysis, just a quick tip here. I would actually name your analysis something that sounds like it was done, like that has a real company name, or sorry, not real company name, but like a made up company name, a sample company name, so that it's less of like, this is a self-learned, self-driven project, and more like, this is what I would do in a company context. So in this case, e-commerce sales analysis performed exploratory analysis and data validation of 100K sales records in Excel and SQL and BigQuery to investigate revenue growth rates, AOV, refund rates, and marketing channel performance for a sample e-commerce company. Discovered a 52% increase in loyalty members, generating 500K more in annual revenue and a $30 higher AOV. And then she talked more about the interactive Tableau dashboard. First of all, look how long this bullet is. I see a lot of bullets that are like, I use SQL and Excel and Tableau to generate insights for blank. A good benchmark is if your bullet is just one line, it's not enough detail. It means that someone else can probably say the same exact thing. And so if you're thinking about like, how do I stand out? You need to go, again, 1 degree deeper, where you have some of those details about what the insights are that you found, because that's what people really care about. So here, the metrics that are in here, obviously sales records, increase in members, revenue, and AOV. And notice that these are not performance metrics. It's not like I decreased the performance time by this amount. It's the metrics of the analysis that she was doing. And to me, this bullet looks like the same way that you would talk about an actual project that you've done at work. So that really stands out. Then the other way to integrate business metrics in your resume and your projects is to talk about the metric names, right? So here she has AOV, refund rates, marketing channel performance. It's like a category of metrics, and then loyalty members. And so that signals to someone like a hiring manager, okay, this person understands like some sales and revenue and marketing metrics, right? And maybe that's related to our company in this way. Okay. Also, I want to show you what it looks like in a project, like for example, a Tableau dashboard. And so in this Tableau dashboard, just to orient, this Tableau dashboard was built to answer that question that you guys saw in the video. The question around like, if I'm a marketing manager and I want to understand the performance of campaigns based on click-through rate, what would I do about it? This is an intermediate dashboard that could be built for a marketing manager that shows the top line metrics that marketing manager would be interested in. So for example, click-through rate, cost per click, sign-up rate, and cost per sign-up. And the dashboard is split into 3 different sections. So there's marketing metrics, signups, and claims. And this is where that domain knowledge comes in, where if you don't yet have that, you need to do a little bit of research. ChatGPT is great for like this kind of thought partnership to understand, okay, if I was a marketing manager, what kind of metrics would I care about? What kind of questions would I ask about? And so a few things to notice here. 1, clarity over complexity. I keep saying that. And then also the dashboard is not that fancy, right? Like if you guys go to Tableau Public and you look at these dashboards that look like they belong in the Modern Museum of Art, we are not using dashboards that look like that at work. We're really not. So focus more on the form and the function of the dashboard rather than the fanciness. And in this case, like to show you, the function of this dashboard, first of all, it's very easy to see those North Star metrics. A marketing manager would come here and be like, immediately, okay, these are how these metrics are doing over the last week or so. And then also we have a table, we have a line graph, and we have a distribution. And so if you think about the kinds of questions that people can answer, sorry, I think it's really blurry. But anyways, you guys can see it's a table, it's a graph, and a distribution graph. The point is, by focusing on only a few metrics in each section, it starts to tell a more cohesive and clear story than if I just had visualizations all over the place. So on one hand, oftentimes I see dashboards that are super colorful, dashboards that use maps, and dashboards that use pie charts. And we really don't use these at work that often because these kinds of visualizations, they're missing the element of time. And a lot of analysis that we do is trying to understand, okay, what happened in the past and what can we do about it? So maps and pie charts, they're like a fancy nice to have, but they kind of lean more towards those self-learned projects rather than dashboards that show, I know my North Star KPIs, and I know how to structure and design a dashboard in a way that tells a story. And in this case, the story that comes through is, okay, for the sign-up metrics, these are the values. And then for the sign-up count, these are the trends. And then for the sign-up mix, that's what is the distribution, right? So I can immediately start to tell, okay, this campaign did this much, had this value last week. Over time, that's how it compares historically. And compared to the other campaigns, this is how it compares across the entire distribution. And so the metrics that are on this dashboard are mostly marketing metrics, as well as claim metrics, and that's related more to insurance, right? So this dashboard speaks to people in marketing, people in healthcare, but most importantly, the way the dashboard is designed around these metrics shows that you have analytical capabilities that can be applied across industries, right? So don't get too worried about like, I don't want to pigeonhole myself into an industry. This framework could be applied to finance metrics too. Like we would just ad lib the metrics, right? We would just put in revenue, sales, bookings with the same structure, but we would still be able to see that like, okay, you know how to build a dashboard that tells this story. Okay. I also wanted to show you guys what it looks like to have metrics in a presentation. So when you get to the later round interviews, you'll probably have a case study or have to present to a panel. And I think oftentimes they also see that metrics are missing in the insights of that part of the presentation. And so this is a slide from another student and a project that we do where the key recommendations are built around increasing signups and awareness, those two metrics, right? And then if you I'll just read one. So COVID campaigns. Investigate the cause of abnormally high cost per signup for COVID-based campaigns, which had 2 signups that costed this much, compared to an average signup cost of $4. Consider removing these campaigns altogether. Notice again, the recommendation is not something that's like really, like statistically rigorous or like really the end all be all. It's more like, this is what I saw in the numbers. I'm bringing this to you, and given this in the context of a team, I think we should investigate this further. And one good exercise is like in all of your projects and your resume, just highlight the metrics and the values you have, because it should be sprinkled throughout. And that is kind of like the data lingo that we're looking for. Okay, and then lastly, for interviews, when you get to the interviews, you're almost definitely going to get asked this question. So what's an analytics project you're particularly proud of? What was the process? What'd you find? And what was impact? Probably won't be worded exactly the same way, but this is like a quintessential analytics question. So when you answer, you should mention specific metrics. What are the metrics that you were looking at? Because that translates to what is the so what of stakeholders. And then also focusing on clarity over complexity. A lot of times people, when they answer this question, they focus a lot on the technical stuff. They're like, I use these formulas in Excel, and then I use these functions in SQL, and then I built a Tableau dashboard using this function. But you want to orient yourself to, why would someone who is going to be using your project care about your analysis, right? So instead, it would be something more like, I was conducting analysis that would be for a marketing manager, where I was focusing on understanding these 3 metrics. And in the analysis, I found that the metrics were impacted by this and this, and they had these kinds of historical trends, right? So orienting in that direction will really help bring out the impact rather than focusing too much on the technicalities. And then let's say last week, okay, so another interview question that it's like representative of the kind of like case question that you might get in an interview. So let's say last week, our conversion rate on the free trial page went down. How would you troubleshoot this? And I'll just mention, like, when I was interviewing a few years ago, for like my first data analyst job, I had gone through all the technical stuff, fine. And then the last round was a round of questions like this that was about like your understanding of business metrics. And I couldn't pass it because I didn't know how to think about these questions. So you guys are learning from my mistakes right now. The way to go about just building this understanding is, first, understand how the metric is calculated, right? So before you step into an interview, write out like the top 10 metrics, I'd say. Document how is it calculated. In this case, a conversion rate is equal to the number of people who got to a page as the denominator. And then on the numerator, it's the number of people who sign up for a free trial, right? So free trials divided by page visits. And if you just break that down further, it's like, okay, what is the numerator impacted by, and then what is the denominator impacted by. So the number of page visits can be impacted by like the campaigns that were being run, referral pages. So like what page do they come from? Even things like what's happening in the larger world, like what was happening with like COVID trends, where people were spending a lot more time on the internet. And then the number of people who actually convert to become a free trial, break that down as well. So what affects that number? It's things like even like the placement of the button, like the incentive to sign up for the trial. Do you collect credit card information on the trial? That also affects that. So when you start to build that understanding, you also start to understand the dimensions related to that metric. And dimensions are qualitative values. I talk more about this in the data lingo video as well. And that is starting to build a more cohesive understanding of the micro and macro dynamics of that metric. So micro is like what's happening inside of the company internally that we have control over, like, you know, if a data pipeline broke and data went missing for a day, or even like, well, we ran an experiment and it didn't go well, and so it dropped down the number of conversions. Whereas macro dynamics are things that are happening externally, and they're a little bit harder to do data analysis on, but sometimes there's a clear correlation. So for example, you know, when I was working at Vimeo and as a video hosting platform, and there was a huge spike in the beginning of 2020, we know that that's because of COVID, and everyone was spending more time online and looking for video capabilities when they couldn't work in person. And so all of that starts to come together to build a story around what is it that affects this metric's movements up and down. And the more you do that, the more you start to build an intuition for these kinds of questions, right? Where like eventually someone could ask, why did the revenue go down? Why did subscribers go down? And I would still be using the same framework to understand it without having to memorize like, okay, sales is this. It was more like I would know the steps to tackle this kind of question. Sorry, there's like really loud ambulances going on outside. I hope you guys can't hear it. Okay, I know lots of you guys have also been curious about the mentorship program, so I'll talk a little bit about that. The program is for 20 motivated aspiring analysts who want to take the most lean path to becoming a data analyst, learn within a collaborative community, and also feel confident in making an impact on the job. And it's with direct and personal mentorship with me and other mentors in the industry as well. And so there's a few principles behind the program that I think can be helpful to just reflect on for yourself as you're going through your own kind of learning journey. One is having the right skills, the right work ethic, and the mindset is one thing. Applying it in the right direction is everything. That, you know, channeling all of that to the right things is what really needs, what unlocks the door. To go faster, learn from the mistakes and the lessons of people who have succeeded before you. And then lastly, skills come from studying, and self-belief comes from experience. And I know, you know, when you don't necessarily have experience, there's a bunch of challenges that people bump into. And the most common ones that I see right now are, one, spraying and praying resumes. If you watch my resume video, I talk about like how to not do this. So by spraying and praying, I mean like when you send out more than 100 resumes and you don't hear back, something needs to change. So reflect on that, understand what the gaps are before you move forward. Feeling scattered or overloaded with information, not knowing how to apply tools in the real job, there being a gap between knowing how to translate data to insights and recommendations, having projects that don't show stakeholder value. So hopefully those examples that I just showed help a little bit with that. And then stepping into the interviews without real experience. So a few ways that we work to overcome this are building a standout resume with a unique narrative, applying your energy to a proven roadmap, having hands-on experience with tools and best practices, learning the frameworks that translate data to action, showing immediate value in projects so they really stand out. So that all of this together, when you step into an interview, you not only have the technical skills, but also the soft skills and the domain knowledge. And for me, like it is important to not only have a curriculum, but also have community. And I think like when you're trying to make a big change in your life or do something really different, you don't really have a network around you, it can be kind of hard when you, you know, it's a little bit isolating, and I feel a little bit demotivating as well if you're going about this on your own. And so part of the program is also having a community of other people around you who are like-minded and also on the same journey. A quick note on how to apply. So the way it works is you fill out a type form and a Calendly questionnaire, and then you have a chat with me. It's not meant to be like a formal interview. It's just an informal chat for me to understand whether or not I can help. And then class starts at the end of September. Enrollment is on a first come basis. And we do talk about tuition in the application call, just so I can understand whether or not it's a fit for you. And the program site is there. You guys can check it out there. And then Vix, if you can, yeah. So the link is in the Zoom chat if you guys want to take that down. And I will also send out an email with this information. Last note about the program is like, I know there's a lot of noise about on LinkedIn and Reddit. It's kind of an echo chamber of the doom and gloom of the job market. If you are, don't pay attention too much to that, is what I want to say, because there absolutely is a way to get to the other side. These are just wins from our students who got jobs in the last 10 weeks. So in the last cohort, 25% of people got jobs within 10 weeks. And then in the first cohort, also 70% of people got jobs within 6 months of the program ending. So don't pay too much attention to the doom and gloom. Focus more on applying your energy in the right direction and getting more clarity on the roadmap before you move forward. And then these are some wins from previous cohorts as well. So like I said, this will be in the slides and then you guys can read more about it there. Okay, I'm gonna pop over to the Q&A. I'm a little nervous, I've never done this before. Okay, well, everyone's anonymous, so I guess we can't do off mute. Maybe we'll figure out how to do it next time. Okay, so would you take a bit of time to explain how to select data sets for projects? Yes. I knew this question was going to come up. So there's a few ways to go about it. When you're early on in your journey, if you guys have watched my my portfolio video, there's 2 buckets of projects, right? There's like the learning projects, and then there's the projects for showing. Learning projects, you can use simple data sets from Kaggle, like find a data set for a company that you're potentially interested in working with. I think it's almost always like easy to go with a big tech company, so like Spotify or Uber, and just start there. The next level up, and I think the hardest, kind of set of real data to get your hands on is data that has real business trends in terms of their values and their dimensions. So there's a few ways to go about this. One is you can go to Kaggle, look up a data set for a large company, and then find a data set that has enough values that align with North Star metrics. So for example, financial metrics and marketing metrics, every company cares about that because every company cares about making money and every company cares about being known, right? So if you can find metrics on a data set on revenue and then actually use ChatGPT to augment that data set with other dimensions. So start to blend what you can find on Kaggle with something else. This takes a little bit of time and research. So for example, you could find a revenue data set from Uber and then be like, I have this data set from Uber that has revenue and sales. I would like to also augment or supplement this data set with dimensions relevant to Uber or like a technology company, right? And then use ChatGPT to generate a data set that you could then pop into like BigQuery or Python to run it and create those dimensions. That is pretty technically difficult, I will say, because I think it's hard to like automatically generate realistic business trends just from that perspective. But like I said, the framework is more important than the actual value. So that's one thing. Another way is so to get a little bit more creative about how you can get your hands on real data. And that would be one, volunteering opportunities, right? So catchafire.com, Bluebonnet Data, those are all organizations that have volunteering opportunities where you can work with an organization that has real data. Like some students in the program, if they don't have any experience, they first build up to it by volunteering with an organization that has Google Analytics data. And after they work with Google Analytics data, that's a huge step up from not having worked with any organizational data before. And that really helps them in interviews with any kind of company that is looking to work with a marketing analyst or marketing data. So those volunteering opportunities. And then the other thing to think about is how can you tap into your primary or secondary network of people who have data that you might be able to analyze and help them with. And this is like, even someone who owns an Etsy store or someone who like has a website or anyone who has like a YouTube or an Instagram and is like trying to grow there, downloading, or even someone who like invests in stocks, like can they download that data, anonymize it a little bit so that they're comfortable, and then use that data because that is actually real data. There was a point in time when I took a year off to pursue photography. Actually, it was during COVID, so that wasn't a good idea. But during that time when I didn't want to get rusty in my data skills, So I went like door to door to different stores in Brooklyn and was like, I can do data analysis and I can do some analysis on your sales to help you understand what are the trends in your inventory and what's working and what's not. And at one point, I worked with a thrift store owner where I built a very lightweight model to help her understand the trends in sales and make recommendations about what she should do for her inventory, like what kind of pieces were doing well that she should source for upcoming months. And then, from that, you have now it's like a internship basically of being a data analyst, or at least real experience. And that gets you two things. It's not only the real data, but it's also the experience of working with a real person in the context of using data to build insights. And that's really what you need, because in interviews, they're going to be focusing more on the soft skill stuff and like, how do you, convey your insights to someone who's non-technical, and when have you done that in the past? So yeah, a few ideas there. Okay. What are some questions to ask to find out what metrics matter? My manager can be vague. What are some good ways to translate vague requests? Okay.
We
I think
actually
these are
do
two.
have her as well in the chat if you wanted to ask her to unmute.
Oh, you do? You can?
Yeah,
Yeah,
she commented in the Zoom chat.
Vix, go ahead if you can do that.
Oh, give me 1 second. I just got to find her real quick.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi. Yep.
Yes, I asked that question. Actually, right now, so like, I'm not working on a technical team, and I do have a more technical background, but that is not my position right now. I'm working at a nonprofit, and I just saw so many ways to like improve things, and
Yeah.
I struggle with translating this to someone who's more non-technical. Like
Okay.
my ally at work has been like the IT manager, he just gets it. But I struggle with, trying to convey technical things to my managers, why we may need it, and
So are you
trying
saying
to
that you're trying to illustrate the value that could be had by having more technical analysis at work?
that, yeah. And I've been recently just starting to put together like dashboards on my own, and I put
Okay.
together like a little prototype to show her, like, hey, I have to
Okay.
show her,
Okay. Yeah. Okay. These are a great question. There's a few kind of sub questions. So one is, how do you start to understand the metrics that matter at work? Also, it's kind of funny because my last big project at Vimeo was called Metrics That Matter. So I love that. It's coming up again now. And that question is, there are certain questions that you can ask in one-on-ones with managers or even stakeholders to understand what they care about, right? Because like metrics are just like, what are the things that you want to move up or down? And questions like that are like, what is our goal for the next week? What's a quantifiable goal for the next 6 months, right? Like, what is it that we want to move up and down? And then also, what affects those metrics? So for example, in a conversation, I could be like, all right, this project seems really open-ended. What do you think would be a good value that if this value went up, that would show that the project was successful? And someone might be like, the increase in the number of trials. And then you could say, okay, can you help me understand what do you think are the things that affect the number of trials? Hopefully that person should have domain knowledge around that area where you could basically get more and more specific. And you're like, okay, if we care about the number of trials, that's the number of people who click on this button. Who else works on tracking this metric? And if your manager is super, super vague, you can go to the next person and basically ask your manager, is there someone else you think would also be interested in this metric? Like, can I talk to them to understand some of the dynamics there? The second question, which is actually more like a soft skill question, which I think can be helpful for everyone, is my manager can be vague. What are some good ways to translate vague requests? So when everything is really ambiguous, again, it's a skill of asking questions. So really good analysts are really good at asking more and more questions to basically force someone to be more specific. And one question you can always start with is why and how. So if someone is like, I want to understand sales, and you're like, okay, there's a lot that can go into that. You can ask like, okay, why is it that we want to understand sales? Because sales are impacted by the marketing budget, and we want to understand how should we better orient our marketing budget for the next year. Okay, how is the marketing budget decided? Okay, it's decided based on the historical trends of which campaigns are doing well, which campaigns are doing badly, and this team is the team that focuses on that. So on one hand, it's like asking why, asking how, trying to get more specific, and then also finding the other people at your organization that can help you get more clarity. Like if you know that your manager has a certain style, then there's also a skill in being able to like go laterally and find the next person. And then the last question is like, how do you demonstrate the value of what data can bring to your current company? I actually think this is an awesome question, because one way to start getting more technical is to do it in your current job, especially if your company has like any data or has any visualization software, to get your hands on that and like start using that. And so the thing that you have to do, which you actually just mentioned, is that you have to show them, because people who are not that data literate yet, like they don't really know the value, they don't see it, they don't understand until they see it. And what I would suggest whenever you're trying to make a case for using data more at your current job is show what you can do first, like build a small analysis, right? So for me, I built a dashboard, I built a proof of concept marketing dashboard, and I was like, we could track the numbers on a weekly and a monthly basis. And using this dashboard, you could slice it by every single region, every single like customer persona that we have, even things like gender and which campaign they came from. And you would be able to see which campaigns are doing the best, which campaigns are doing the worst, with like 3 clicks. And so it's a bit of like almost like persuasion by showing what you can do and building a proof of concept first, because oftentimes the case with stakeholders is that they don't know what they're missing until they see it. With business metrics, I have trouble prioritizing them. Yeah, it seems there are different ways to evaluate something. How do you know which way is right? Okay, this is another good question, because even within North Star metrics, it's just now when I was talking about the dashboard, for example, right? You saw I had sign up metrics, conversion rate metrics, sign up count, and I didn't say like this one is more important than the other. So normally as a data analyst, you actually wouldn't in the beginning be the one completely deciding like this is the most important metric. This is where you would be on a team and you would have the context of like working with a marketing analyst. And I keep using marketing because I think it's the easiest for everyone to understand, where a marketing analyst would be like, well, if we have conversion rate and sign up count and also sign up rate, like the goal of this specific campaign was to get more signups. So sign up rate and sign up count are the most important. Versus, well, the goal of this campaign was actually just like for awareness, just for people to like get the word out a little bit more, not to actually convert. So the North Star metric there is more like click-through rate and impressions, rather than the effectiveness and the ROI of getting people to actually sign up. So again, that becomes the skill of like knowing the right questions to ask and knowing the people to go to, because you won't be deciding on these things as in a vacuum. If we bring it back to projects and you're trying to figure out how to prioritize them, just start with 3 metrics. You don't have to pick a winning metric of those 3, right? Pick those 3 metrics. And then also in your projects, I mean, I think you saw in the video, the example, right? We're defining all those metrics. Then I give insights about all those metrics. And realistically, you would bring it to a team and be like, we saw this metric go up, we saw this metric go down. Which one do we care more about? And which one do we have more control and leverage over actually changing right now with the resources and the knowledge that we have? If it's that one, then that one, we're going to orient ourselves more on there. Okay, I have no data analytics experience and trying to make portfolio projects. How to do projects that have a business value and compress a high manager. So in the example, I need to take a drink of water really quick. So in the example of what I put on the resume, right, you can almost like back into this, like reverse engineer based on what I had put in the resume, right? So watch the resume video and then the business metrics video, like look at the screen. Oh, sorry, it's on the slides here, actually. In the slides, I'll send it to you later. And look at the slides and look at what they're analyzing, because these are projects that have been effective in like sealing the deal in an interview. And so one, have business value. In this case, it's not going to be business value as in like you actually impacted something at a business, but it can show your ability to bring business value by orienting yourself around real business metrics, right? So in the end, what your goal should be is that your analysis, your final insights, you should be able to say things like, I discovered this, and given this, I would recommend general guidance in this direction. The other thing to impress a hiring manager is, this is the tougher part, is that they need to use industry best practices around like, how do you structure your code? How do you design a dashboard? And so before you dive into like, let me just do this analysis and build something, if it's going to be a showing project, do some research on what are industry best practices for data analysts of how to format, structure code, how to design a dashboard. And at the end of the day, the thing that I think is the cherry on top that a lot of people don't necessarily pay attention to is the aesthetics of the whole thing. How does everything come together? So the recommendation slide just then, the dashboard just then, it was very, very clean. And so, yeah, those are, I think, like to summarize, the first, the North Star metrics, and then secondly, having the industry best practices. Just having portfolio projects without any experience, I'm going to be super real with you guys, like just having portfolio projects with zero experience working in an organization, it will be harder, which is why the next step up is to actually build projects in the context of an organization, which is like to go find a volunteering opportunity or an unpaid internship or like freelance work like I was talking about. Okay. How do we assess data to translate it into analytics, particularly when dealing with multiple analytics? Is there a specific method? I'm going to translate this question to be something along the lines of like, how do you translate data to insights? Because I don't know how do you translate data to insights? Maybe, I don't know what multiple analytics necessarily means, but in terms of translating data to an actual insight, I'll give you a very simple framework because this definitely needs more than 9 minutes. But one way to think about it is like, first you start with the metric and you take a big question and you break it down into smaller questions. So I'm a big fan of questions, obviously. So let's say you have a set of metrics, right? You start with like, these are the marketing metrics that I'm going to work with. Then you ask, what would someone working with these metrics care about? You can use ChatGPT for this. Like, what would a marketing manager care about these metrics? What would they want to know? Give me some ideas. And again, maybe that question is something like, how are the campaigns doing? Or like, why did our click-through rate go up and down? Then you need to break it down into smaller questions. So why did our click-through rate go up and down? Or why did our click-through rate go down, right? Smaller questions are like, how much did it go down by? When did it go down? Is this decrease normal given historical trends? Which dimension did it go down in? Like, which segment did it go down in? Then you can start to translate those smaller questions to the technical stuff, right? So things like, when did this metric go down? It can be answered in a pivot table. It can be answered by a line graph. And then you start moving it more towards the technical tools. So there's 2 skills there. One skill is the ability to ask smaller and smaller questions. The other skill is the ability to know the capacity of what technical tools can do so that you can identify, okay, this small question is answered by a pivot table. Right? So if someone's like, well, the next small question is, what are the historical trends in click-through rate? Then the technical tool that it translates to is, this could be a pivot table. I could build a line graph. I could build a distribution graph. Then when it comes to like, I think maybe the next natural question would be like, well, how do I decide which one of those techniques is best? There's not always like a best. It's a combination of understanding what is the stakeholder looking for, which normally you would do in requirements gathering. Like you would have a meeting with them and be like, what's the format that would be most helpful? What are we trying to build here? What's the outcome that we're looking for? And then the other skill is knowing, okay, the technical, like the checkboxes of like pivot table does this, a line graph does this, a distribution graph does that. One way to back into it maybe is like, think about visualizations and write down what are the questions that these visualizations solve for. So a line graph solves for what were the historical trends. A distribution graph, which is what I was showing you, the area graph that has like the colors all filled out, it answers the question, like what proportion of a total population is this thing responsible for? Like what proportion of the total sales is North America responsible for? That's the question that answers. And then a table answers a question like, what were the values last week? What were the values last month? And the tables are really commonly overlooked, I think, in data projects because they don't seem like really fancy, but a lot of our dashboards it's a lot of reporting and building tables. Okay. How important is knowledge for A/B testing for junior level analysts? I think if we think about what I was saying before, where it's like apply your energy to the most important things. Well, I was saying like the right roadmap, but in this case, apply your energy in the most important things. A/B testing is a nice to have. It's the same with Python. Like Python is a nice to have for junior level analysts because you probably aren't going to get tested on this in the interview. Like right now, if your goal is to get a job in data, you can't learn everything at the same time. So A/B test, what I would recommend is if you see it in job descriptions, you continuously see it in the job descriptions that you want to apply to, especially I think for marketing and product analysts, it's a little bit more important. Then start familiarizing yourself with the concept of how A/B tests work, but you don't need to, like, you could spend like 2 days researching this, right? So you need to understand how does a confidence interval work? How does a p-value work? What is standard deviation? What does mean? Like, be able to talk about it in English. You don't need to like memorize the formula, but be able to talk about it in English. What does a null hypothesis mean? And then also get familiar with what A/B testing platforms look like. Like, literally just Google image A/B testing platform and look at what it looks like behind the scenes. So you can see, you can start to put together, oh, okay, like you could build a dashboard that shows all the experiments, that shows the p-value and the standard deviation. And like, that's what an analyst would do here. They would build a dashboard in this platform that shows the results of these experiments. But A/B testing is obviously not something you can get like full experience on completely on your own, because you need that data, you need that platform to run the experiments. But again, it's a nice to have for junior level data analysts. Focus more on like getting really good at Excel, getting really good at SQL, getting really good at a visualization software, and then also the soft skills and the communication skills. Okay, I'll answer one more question. I'm surprised the AI question didn't come up, guys. Okay, should we make the work experience bullets long as well as the project bullets? Yeah, that's like a general rule of thumb for all experience, that if it's just 1 line long, it probably doesn't have enough detail. Like, someone else could probably say a similar thing, so it won't really stand out. A lot of resumes have this. So the way to really stand out is to go 1 level deeper. Again, like, bring in the metrics. 3 things that you should have in every single bullet if you can. Metrics in terms of the quantified value or the name, the stakeholders, like who you were working with, and also what was the outcome. And even if the outcome wasn't like decrease the time by X%, more like used to guide decisions on blank, or like improve the productivity of the team, like something like that. So bullets, I think, should be at least like 2, sometimes 3 lines long, depending on the format of your resume, just so that it really stands out and it has more detail. Okay. All right, I think we got through a good number of questions. I wish we could have like actually like talked rather than me talking the whole time, but maybe next time we'll figure out a way to do that. Thank you guys for joining. I hope this was helpful in some way. And like I said, if you're interested in the mentorship program, check out the website, check out the Typeform link and fill out those questions. Take some time to actually think about your responses to those questions, right? And yeah, we'll do more YouTube stuff and more Lunch and Learn soon. All right, guys, don't forget to subscribe. Every single week, I'm going to be posting a new video with the real strategies and insights that have helped my students land their first data job in 3 months or less. So I'll see you in the next one.